They walked past him every single day. No glance. No words. Just another homeless man on the edge of life. But one day, everything changed. When someone the whole world knew. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Walked up to him. And said, "I've been looking for you." What happened next didn't just touch hearts. It shook the internet. 36 seconds. 40 million views. And at the center of it all, an old man with the eyes of a soldier, and a strength you can't see on the surface. This isn't a story about charity. It's a story about dignity, the kind no one can take away. Watch until the end, because the final moment says more than 1,000 words. The California sun dipped low behind the skyline, painting the streets of Los Angeles in shades of amber and gold. In a quiet corner near the edge of downtown, tucked between forgotten alleyways and the murmurs of passing cars, sat a man named Eloy. To the passers-by, he was just another homeless man, scruffy, silent, wrapped in layers that had seen better days. His beard was streaked with white, his back hunched not just from age but from years of carrying silent burdens that shaped the way he walked through life. Few knew his name. Fewer still knew his story. Eloy was a Vietnam veteran. He had served his country with pride, Marine Recon, 3rd Battalion. Jungle patrols, ambushes, nights under foreign skies lit with tracer fire. He returned not to celebrations, but to quiet uncertainty, a country still learning how to welcome its veterans back. In time, his medals were boxed away, his uniform folded neatly and forgotten. Life became a series of jobs that never lasted, couch hopping that turned into shelters, and finally, the streets. But Eloy never begged. Every morning, he polished his old boots. Sat in the same spot. Watched the world go by with the same quiet dignity he had in uniform. And every evening, he spoke aloud the names of his brothers in arms who didn't make it back. It was the only ritual he never broke. The city changed around him, new buildings, new people, faster everything. But Eloy stayed. Invisible, yet rooted. That was, until he came. It started like any other afternoon. Eloy was cleaning the area around his sleeping spot near a community park, stacking old books neatly in a crate he used as a seat. A few joggers passed. A mother pushed a stroller. Life churned as it always did, indifferent, buzzing. Then, the unmistakable sound of a low rumble broke the rhythm of the street. It was a motorcycle. Sleek. Powerful. But the man who rode it wasn't what drew attention. It was the man walking beside him, tall, unmistakable. Even in his late 70s, his frame was powerful, his gait smooth. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Eloy didn't look up right away. But the crowd gathering did. Phones came out. Whispers filled the air. But Arnold didn't wave or pose. He walked directly toward Eloy. And then, the unexpected happened. He stopped. Just a few feet away. He extended a hand. "Eloy." The old veteran blinked, confused. "Yes." Arnold smiled warmly. "I've been looking for you." 2 weeks earlier, Arnold had partnered with a local nonprofit called Homes for Heroes. It was a modest but impactful organization that built small, sustainable homes for unhoused veterans. Arnold, known for his love of action and advocacy alike, had donated not just funds, but time. He visited build sites. Laid insulation. Hauled lumber with the team. But this build, was different. He had asked for a name. "Give me someone who served. Someone who's fallen through the cracks. Someone who needs not charity, but dignity," he'd said. And the name that came back was Eloy. It had taken a week of searching. Volunteers asking around, comparing old VA records with known locations of camps and shelters. But now, Arnold stood face to face with the man who, without knowing it, had been chosen to receive more than just a roof. He was about to receive a chance. Arnold knelt slightly, making himself eye level. "You served in Vietnam," he said gently. Eloy's eyes narrowed, not out of suspicion, but from the years of being overlooked. "Yes. I did not serve," Arnold said honestly, "but I have deep respect for those who did. And I know you've been through a lot. But I want you to come with me. There's something I want to show you." Eloy looked down at his belongings. A box of old photos. A threadbare duffel bag. A tattered journal. "Can I bring these?" he asked quietly. Of course, Arnold said, and offered his hand again. This time, Eloy took it. They drove in silence. The road led them to a quiet, fenced-in lot on the outskirts of the city. Lined with 10 tiny homes, each barely more than 200 square feet, but beautiful in their simplicity, wood-paneled, flower beds out front, solar panels on top. One had a welcome mat. Another had a flagpole. At the center, volunteers were gathered, holding back tears. Arnold stepped out of the vehicle and motioned Eloy toward a small blue house with white trim. The door had a ribbon across it. And taped to that ribbon, a sign in bold handwriting. "Welcome home, Eloy." Eloy stopped. His breath caught in his throat. I don't understand," he murmured. Arnold pulled a small key from his pocket and handed it over. "This is yours," he said. "No cameras. No press. Just you, this key, and the home you deserve." Eloy took the key with trembling hands. He tried to speak, but the words refused to come. And then, he broke. Not in weakness, but in release. Tears streamed down his face that he lowered his head, overwhelmed with emotion, openly, as Arnold wrapped him in a hug, firm, warm, steady. It was a hug that offered quiet support, not answers, just presence. The volunteers clapped, quietly. A few cried too. No one said much. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, kindness had spoken louder than words ever could. The inside of the tiny home smelled of fresh pine and clean paint. It was warm, quiet, and still, almost too still for Eloy, who had grown used to the chorus of sirens, passing footsteps, and restless sleep under the open sky. He stepped through the doorway with careful hesitation, still gripping the key in his hand like a precious coin. There was a bed. A real bed. A chair by the window. A kitchenette, compact but complete. On the wall above the small desk was a framed photograph, an American flag waving in the wind above a sunrise. Eloy stopped in the doorway. His boots made no sound on the smooth wooden floor. "I've never had a place that didn't echo when I walked in," he said quietly. Arnold stood beside him, arms crossed, not out of pride, but humility. "You do now." Eloy nodded, blinking rapidly. He stepped inside and ran his fingers over the table, the light switch, the tiny bookshelf stocked with military biographies and a worn copy of Mice and Men. Everything had been chosen with care. Nothing flashy. Just, thoughtful. There was even a letter taped to the fridge, handwritten in loopy cursive. "Dear Eloy. We may never meet, but please know this. You are not forgotten. You are loved. And you are home now. A grateful stranger." Eloy's hand trembled slightly as he traced the ink with his finger. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You already said it," Arnold replied gently. "You served. That's more than enough." The story spread fast, not because Arnold posted it, he hadn't. He'd asked the charity to avoid any press. But one volunteer had taken a short video, a candid moment just after Eloy received his key. Arnold and Eloy hugging, the older man breaking down in tears, and Arnold simply holding him, no words, no big speech. Just presence. The clip was only 36 seconds long. But it went viral within hours. Over 40 million views in 2 days. The world saw something it desperately needed: sincerity without spectacle. Compassion without cameras. And a man, visibly rugged, with a past etched into every wrinkle, finding peace in a place smaller than most people's closets, yet large enough to hold his dignity. Back in the home, Eloy sat in a single chair beside the window. Outside, the volunteers were beginning to leave, some lingering to wave. One of them, a young woman with bright eyes and a USMC cap, knocked gently and peeked in. "Sir," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you." Eloy furrowed his brow. "For what?" "For being one of the ones who came back, and for holding on this long." Eloy looked at her. There was something in her gaze, a quiet strength he recognized. "You served?" he asked. She nodded. "Afghanistan. 3 tours. I got lucky." "You?" "Vietnam. 3rd Recon." "Not sure about the lucky part." She smiled and handed him a folded piece of paper. "I drew this when I was in therapy. They said it helps. Maybe you'll want to hang it up." He unfolded it slowly. It was a pencil sketch, rough, beautiful. A soldier sitting beneath a tree, rifle laid beside him, staring into a field where wildflowers grew. At the bottom, in block letters, "Still here. Still standing. Still moving forward." Eloy's eyes brimmed with tears again. "Thank you," he said softly. "No," she said, stepping back. "Thank you." That night, Eloy sat on the porch of his tiny house, a coffee mug in hand. It was instant coffee, a donation from a nearby shelter, but it tasted better than any coffee he could remember. Arnold sat beside him, legs stretched out, looking up at the stars. "You know," Arnold said, "when I was younger, I used to think power came from lifting the heaviest things, being the strongest in the room." He paused, glancing at Eloy. "But now I think true strength is surviving the weight nobody sees." Eloy didn't respond right away. "I thought I was invisible," he said after a moment. "Not just to people. To God. To time. I started to feel like I was fading away, like the world had forgotten I was still here." Arnold turned to him. "But here you are." Eloy nodded, swallowing hard. "Here I am." In the following days, people showed up with more than just praise. A local barber offered free haircuts to all veterans. A carpenter donated a rocking chair. Children wrote letters to Mr. Eloy, thanking him for his service. One school even held an assembly titled, "Home is More Than a Roof." And through it all, Eloy stayed the same, quiet, grounded. He wasn't used to attention. But he accepted the kindness with humility. Not once did he play the victim, nor the hero. He just existed with the kind of grace that made others sit up and listen. What few people knew was that Eloy had once written poetry. Tucked inside his journal, beneath dog-eared pages and water stains, were dozens of verses. Words written by flashlight, intense, in alleyways, in quiet desperation. One evening, Arnold asked if he could read them. Eloy hesitated. Then nodded. He handed over the journal, and Arnold read a single line aloud. "I built no skyscrapers, but I carried bricks for the broken." Arnold closed the notebook and looked at Eloy. "That," he said, "is strength." But as the media storm swirled, a question began to rise online. Was this real? Was Eloy actually a Vietnam veteran? Or was it just a feel-good story tailored for virality? The skepticism wasn't malicious, it was just the internet doing what it does. And that, unknowingly, would lead to a truth that would silence everyone. The internet can be a wondrous thing. It connects, celebrates, and shares beauty across the globe in seconds. But it can also be suspicious, especially when something seems too good to be true. And for some, that video of Eloy embracing Arnold in front of a tiny blue home was just that. "Is he really a veteran?" one post read. "I've seen too many fake stories go viral," said another. By the third day, the whispers had turned into threads. People began digging. There were no recent VA records under Eloy that matched the man in the video. No clear last name had been shared. Just a first name, and the story. Arnold, of course, was unfazed. He had spoken to Eloy himself, seen the photos, read the names etched into the back cover of the journal Eloy kept, names of fellow soldiers, all lost. But Arnold also knew this moment needed more than trust. It needed truth. So he made a quiet call. 2 mornings later, a white van pulled up near Eloy's tiny home. Out stepped a man in uniform, tall, African-American, early 60s, his posture still sharp despite age. His name was Sergeant Major Harold Denton, retired. He and Eloy had once patrolled the same jungles. Arnold met Harold at the edge of the lot, briefed him quietly, and then gestured toward the house. "I'll wait here," he said. Harold nodded and walked slowly toward the porch. Eloy sat there, shelling peanuts into a paper cup. He looked up. And froze. Harold stopped at the bottom step. "Eloy." Eloy stood, stunned, his mouth opening and closing like he wasn't sure if he could trust his eyes. "Denton?" Neither moved for a second. Then, Eloy stepped down, and the two men met halfway, colliding in a rough, shaky hug that was part laughter, part sob, and all memory. "I thought you were lost forever," Eloy whispered. Harold stepped back, eyes misted. "I thought you were." Inside the home, they sat across from each other like two ghosts who'd wandered back into the world of the living. They spoke of '68, of jungle rain, of radios that went silent when things got loud, and of a firefight near Da Nang that neither man thought they'd survive. And then, Harold pulled something from his jacket. A laminated copy of their unit roster. He pointed to the bottom. Eloy Castillo. Sergeant. Confirmed MIA, until now. Eloy leaned back, stunned. They thought I was missing. You left before the debrief. Never claimed your benefits. You vanished, brother. Eloy looked down. I didn't want to be found. After what we saw. Harold nodded solemnly. I know. Arnold stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, quiet as the sun rose behind him. It was real. And now, the world would know. That same evening, Arnold posted a simple video, his first comment on the viral story. It was raw, filmed on his phone. No filters. No edits. He stood next to Eloy, who looked straight into the camera, holding a small chain in his hand. A dog tag. Tarnished. Bent. But unmistakably his. This is Eloy Castillo, Arnold said. He served in Vietnam. He fought with honor. And he came home to a country that forgot him. Eloy held up the tag. It was the last thing I kept, he said softly. Even when I had nothing else. Arnold's voice caught slightly. But now he has a home. Not because of who I am, but because of what he gave. The video ended with the two men in silhouette, the tiny house behind them glowing under porch lights. It reached 100 million views in a week. And this time, there were no questions. Only gratitude. But with truth comes memory. And memory isn't always gentle. One night, about a week after the home was given, Arnold received a call. It was from a neighbor in the tiny home community. Eloy's not answering his door, she said. We're worried. Arnold drove over himself. He found Eloy sitting inside, eyes distant, a cassette player spinning a tape without sound. In his lap, a letter. Tattered, yellowed. Arnold stepped in. Everything okay? Eloy didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, this was from Maria. My fiancée. She wrote it in '69. Arnold sat beside him. She thought I left forever. Eloy said. Said she waited a year. Then moved on. He handed Arnold the letter. I kept it in my sock all through the camps, shelters. Read it every Christmas. Even when I hated her for moving on. Arnold read the faded ink. At the end, Maria had written. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe. And I hope you find peace, even if not with me. The next morning, Arnold made another call. And by evening, a woman named Maria, now in her 70s, walked up to the little blue house with cautious steps and a bouquet of marigolds. She and Eloy sat on the porch for 2 hours, saying little at first. Then, Eloy handed her back the letter. I kept it safe. She cried, and hugged him the way someone hugs an old photograph that suddenly walks again. They didn't need a reunion story. They had closure. That night, Eloy placed the cassette player on his desk, replaced the tape, and pressed play. It was the voice of a young woman, barely audible. Come home soon, mi amor. And finally, he had. Eloy woke to birdsong. Not sirens. Not scuffling footsteps or the hollow rumble of garbage trucks. Birdsong. It had been almost 3 weeks since he stepped into the tiny blue home for the first time, but every morning still felt surreal. He moved slowly, still adjusting to the rhythm of comfort. The bed didn't creak with every shift. The floor stayed warm beneath his feet. The coffee pot, a gift from a volunteer, gurgled its welcome. He poured a cup and stepped out onto the porch just as the sun slipped over the trees. He sat in his favorite chair, the one the carpenter had brought, and stared out across the quiet lot. Then he did something he hadn't done in decades. He smiled without pain behind it. Across town, Arnold was on the phone with the director of Homes for Heroes. The organization had received an unprecedented flood of donations after Eloy's story went viral. Messages poured in from veterans around the country. Some were still unhoused. Others simply wanted to say thank you. But one letter stood out. It came in a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a short note, handwritten in blocky letters. I served with Eloy. Thought he was gone. Turns out I was the one who disappeared. Tell him, he kept me alive. Even now. CJ. and folded within the letter was a single $1 bill. On the front, someone had stamped 3 words. Do more good. Arnold stared at it for a long time. Then he made a decision. Later that week, Homes for Heroes unveiled a new section of their project, a plaque mounted on a stone pedestal near the cluster of tiny homes. On it were the names of every veteran who had received a home through the program. And above the names, engraved in bronze, were Eloy's words, the line from his journal. I built no skyscrapers, but I carried bricks for the broken. When Eloy saw it, he said nothing for a long time. Then he whispered, that's not about me. Arnold placed a hand on his shoulder. It's about all of you. The media attention eventually faded, as it always does. New stories. New headlines. But something lingered. A movement. People began building more than homes. A bakery in Fresno added a pay-it-forward wall for unhoused veterans. A school in Oregon created a program where kids wrote holiday cards to soldiers and former service members, thousands of them. One boy included a crayon drawing of a tiny house. At the bottom, in crooked handwriting, everyone deserves a place to sleep. Back in the tiny home village, a new veteran had just arrived. His name was Paul. Gulf War. Withdrawn. Barely spoke. But Eloy greeted him the way Arnold had once greeted him, with quiet eyes and a steady handshake. This chair's open, Eloy said, patting the second seat on his porch. Paul hesitated. Then sat. They didn't speak at first. Just watched the sun set. Then Paul asked, how long you been here? Eloy looked around, smiled. All my life. I just didn't know it until 3 weeks ago. One last video made its way around the internet before the story settled into history. Arnold stood outside the same blue house, holding a key between his fingers. I'm not here as a celebrity, he said. I'm here because I believe no one should be left behind. Not just in times of war, but in everyday life too. He turned to Eloy, who stood beside him in a clean button-up shirt and polished boots. Eloy spoke slowly, his voice firm. I'm not a miracle. I'm proof that small things, done with great kindness, can change a life. Arnold handed him a box of spare keys, duplicates for the other houses in the community. Eloy looked down, confused. What are these for? Arnold grinned. Because now, you're the one who gets to welcome them home. And so, the story that started with a simple act, a key, a handshake, a hug, didn't end there. It grew. In silent circles of kindness. In words unspoken. In homes where no one knocked in fear. Where the lock turned with ease. And the door always opened. Because behind it was not just shelter. But dignity. And a man named Eloy. Still here. Still standing. Still moving forward. Still building a better world, one good deed at a time.